Hello, everyone. I'm Eric Bolling, along with Lisa Booth, Juan Williams, Dana Perino, and Greg Gutfeld. It's 5 o'clock in New York City, and this is The Five. Well, there's a lot of breaking news this afternoon. First, at approximately 1:15 p.m., the New York Times named the two sources that House Intelligence Committee Chairman Devin Nunes has said showed him the evidence that communications from the Trump transition team had been incidentally collected. Fox News has confirmed the sources independently. They are White House staffers at the National Security Council, lawyer Michael Ellis, and Intel Director Ezra Cohen-Watnick. That led to this flurry of activity at Ranking Member Adam Schiff's presser on Capitol Hill.
If, in fact, the National Security Council staff that discovered these materials reportedly in the ordinary course of business are the same national security staff that provided them to the chairman, to be provided to the president, it raised a profound question why they were not directly provided to the White House by the national security staff and instead were provided through a circuitous route involving the chairman. If that was designed to hide the origin of the materials, that raises profound questions about just what the White House is doing that need to be answered.
So to unpack what we have, there are 3 investigations going on over 2 separate topics. First topic, whether or not there was any collusion with the Russians by Team Trump during the election, and the second being, was there surveillance of Team Trump by the intel departments, and if so, who unmasked the names of those being surveilled? Also, very important, was that very unmasking even legal? So much to talk about, so let's jump right in. And Dana, we'll start with you. What was the big information that we got today?
Well, I think there's 2, and we're going to get to it a little bit later about the Senate hearing, which I thought was also interesting. In this case, this is another day, yet another story, which actually leads to more questions than answering them. And I go back to the thing, I really think the White House should appoint somebody who is the communications person that is just answering these questions, because if not, they will not be able to talk about anything else. You have a couple of different threads here. I'll just point out 2 of them. So Sean Spicer has not said at the podium who had actually cleared Representative Nunes into the White House, and looked like I know how that goes. Like, you don't even want to ask to find out. And the other thing, the people in the White House should actually try to protect him, because he has to go out there and have to answer all of these questions. The other thing is that Nunes says in one of his interviews that he doesn't think that anybody in the West Wing, even in the House Intelligence Committee, was his general counsel, is actually, his title is special assistant to the president. And maybe his office is actually in the old executive office building, because there's not enough office space there in the West Wing, but he is part of the West Wing staff. The other thing is that now the committee, now the White House says, well, the Democrats of the committee, now they are welcome to come to the White House to see the same information. They could have saved themselves all of this headache by doing that at the very beginning. I just think that they keep creating more problems for themselves by just trying to win a news cycle than just cooperating with the investigation and letting it run its course.
Greg, and we're still trying to figure out now, General Flynn, Michael Flynn, was unmasked, right?
Yes.
Now we're trying to figure out, was he surveilled legally, and was he unmasked legally? And maybe finally, if we have both committees, Senate and House Intel committees, coming to the White House to discuss all the information, maybe we can get some answers to that one as well.
This story is a fat man's sweater. You pull one string, and it unravels and unravels and unravels, and we're going to talk about it for the next 4 years. Obviously, you're right. It's not about the incidental collection, but the dissemination. It's one thing for the pharmacist to know what pills you're taking. It's another thing for him to talk about it at a convention of pharmacists in their underground secret lair beneath Walgreens. So that's the problem. But Nunes is somewhat faulted. He has to be faulted for going to the town square first before going to the sheriff, i.e. Sheriff Woody, Adam Schiff. They are dead ringers for each other. I've said it before. But if he'd gone to Adam Schiff maybe before and then gone to the town square, I think it would make a little more sense.
Yep.
But that's just me. And what do I know? Very little.
No, you know a lot.
No, I disagree.
I disagree with your disagreement. One, Team Trump, they've been surveilled, they've been unmasked, maybe illegally unmasked, they've been accused. Some people would say that in this.
You know, I don't even know where to start with you some days. You know, but let me just say.
How about I love you?
You can start with surveilled, or you can go to unmasked, or accused.
Okay, nobody. Devin Nunes doesn't say it was illegal. It was legal surveillance. And if in the course of legal surveillance, they incidentally collected some information or people who were Americans, typically that's supposed to be masked. But it's not a matter of legal or illegal.
No,
Well,
and actually,
one of
them also, one of the reports, and of course I've not seen the document, so I don't know.
Really?
Finds out that basically it was Russians talking amongst themselves about how they were trying to get influence into the Trump team. So they're talking about people that work for President Trump, and they want access to him. That's how their names are in there. It's not like those people were actually talking to the Russians, according to that one report, which I think I can understand why they would want Nunes to come and then go to try to protect them. But I also feel like if they found that information, why not take it to the White House General Counsel's office or to the press office and say, here, you take this, instead of trying to this really Keystone Cop sort of way of getting Nunes to come and try to do their dirty work for them.
Well, let me just add one quick thing before Lisa jumps in, which is that I was surprised today when Paul Ryan was interviewed, and Paul Ryan says, when Nunes came to see me, Paul Ryan, Speaker of the House, and so he's, in essence, Nunes' boss. So when Nunes comes to see me, he says, Nunes gives me the impression, there were some whistleblowers. I got this information from whistleblowers. Well, today we find out...
The intel community.
What is he talking...
No, he said that they worked for the intel community.
Well, he said they were whistleblowers. I didn't know that part, worked for the intel community. But he said that they were whistleblowers. And now we find out, basically, it was the White House blowing smoke intentionally to obstruct and obscure the legitimate investigation of this case. And to me, that's the headline.
I'm not sure that's the leap we're all willing to take, that the White House was trying to obstruct and obscure the information.
Where'd the information come from? We know it came from the White House.
We understand.
No, we know it came from the White House at this point.
We don't exactly know what the information is, Juan. We know that's who the sources are.
But
we don't know what the actual information is yet.
Well, ultimately, it's all concerning. I mean, it's concerning the fact that there's an FBI investigation. It's concerning the fact that there's the unmasking of names, that there's illegal leaks of classified information, especially when you have people like Gowdy in the Russian hearing, essentially trying to pin the blame at the Obama administration's feet. You also have that on the backdrop of the fact that President Obama changed the NSA rules for how information can be widely disseminated across the government. You also have the New York Times article about the Obama administration leaving breadcrumbs of intelligence information behind. That's all concerning. So all of this is concerning. But in regards, well, real quick, in regards to Chairman Nunes, where he needs to be concerned, and I do agree with Dana in the sense that there's so much that could have been done to avoid a lot of this backlash. And the problem he's going to face if more Republicans like Representative Dent, like Walter Jones, that step forward and ask for him to step down, that's when he's going to start to face real heat.
I want to turn to the next topic, but before we go there, and it's something that dovetails to what you just said, Lisa, Evelyn Farkas, I really want to bring this up. I think this is extremely important. Evelyn Farkas worked in the State Department. She was Assistant Deputy Secretary to Russian Affairs. She told the Obama White House, after she left, she went back and told the Obama White House, she left in 2015, when President Trump was President-elect Trump, she told the Obama White House to put away some of the information that they were gathering, that the Obama White House was gathering on the Trump transition team. How does a mid-level, not a high level, but a mid-level Assistant Deputy Secretary of Russian Affairs, maybe Dana can answer this, how does she have access to this information, and why should she be advising the current White House, Obama White House, on this?
I don't know her at all, and I also know that I thought it was interesting, because I looked into that yesterday. She made those remarks about 6 weeks ago.
Yeah, March 2nd.
It's not new information. The actually only new information that we have today is that we actually know that the information and the sources for Representative Nunes came from the White House. That's actually the new development today. Like all the other stuff, the unmasking of Flynn, are still the unanswered questions and still part of the investigation. I don't know how she
I will tell you, I'm sorry, Lisa, we want to get this next soundbite because it's on this topic. Hopefully they're going to call some of these witnesses. Boy, guys, this would be my first witness to find out what the heck she was involved with, what her involvement was, and who else had access and who else was able to unmask. Anyway, all right, the Senate Intel Committee held its first public hearing today on Russia's meddling in our election. The FBI is also investigating whether the Trump campaign in any way worked with the Russians. Is the president himself under investigation? Speaker Ryan doesn't think so.
I do not believe that that's the case.
So if we don't know that,
well,
do you think
I won't speak for the FBI, but I've never seen any suggestion or any evidence that that's the case. I don't believe that he is. So I don't think that he is under investigation. No one has suggested that he is, and not even in a vague way. I don't believe that he is.
Our chief intelligence correspondent, Catherine Herridge, just spoke to one of the president's campaign advisors wrapped up in this controversy. Carter Page will be a witness at next week's Senate hearings. Here's a preview of what we can expect to hear.
Did you work with the Russians to help the Trump campaign?
Absolutely not. I did nothing that could even be possibly viewed as helping them in any way.
Did you work with the Russians to hurt the Clinton campaign?
Absolutely not. In no way, shape, or form.
And there'll be more of that interview tonight on Special Report at 6 p.m. Eastern. I'm sorry, Lisa, I cut you off before. Your thoughts on thoughts on this?
Well, I was going to say, ultimately, I think all of the conversations that we're having, which is why it makes the FBI investigation the most important here, because hopefully that is one that is being done with politics aside, and also has the biggest consequences, obviously, that, could lead to legal ramifications. So that's what is ultimately, I think, the most important thing here. But also, I think what was important today in the Senate hearing as well is the conversation of the fact that the Russian meddling and meddling in our election is something that has been long happening in both U.S. And European elections, which is what came up today. We also had Russia not that long ago hack into the Joint Chiefs of Staff. So, this is important, but this is something that we have long been dealing with.
You know what struck me, too, was Nunes said he'd never heard of Carter Page.
Yep. Or
Holy
Roger Stone.
smokes.
And
he never heard of Roger
investigation.
Stone. He never heard of Carter Page. I mean, is that credible? Talk about sacrificing not only your credibility, but the idea that you are a serious person in Washington. I mean, we sit here, Eric, we know who Carter Page is. We know Roger Stone. And the guy who's supposed to be in charge of the House probe says, oh, I never heard of him. That's just, it's beyond reasonable.
You know what I find interesting with these hearings is how the openness in which the Democrats and Republicans both are so willing to dissect the chilling nature of an adversary, which is something they refuse to do with Islamism. When I'm watching this and I see the interest in Russia, and I understand Russian meddling in our election, it's a bad thing. It's very bad. But it's an easy target to take because it doesn't have with it the baggage of bigotry, that prevents our politicians from saying, no, there's an existential threat that we should be having hearings about every day. It's called Islamism, but we won't do that. And then meanwhile, you see that the left, they're finally up in arms about Soviet but now Russian aggression and intrusion after 4 decades in which tens of millions of people suffered and died at the hands of communism. And here they are upset over spam bots.
No, but I don't think we need to wait. I think that both the things you say, I have tremendous fear for us in terms of the terrorists. But let's be clear. There was testimony today. We'll get into it in a moment, Eric said, in terms of the Senate. And one person said, it's very clear. The Russians are trying to encourage a sense of disbelief in democracy.
I've said that on this show 5 times.
They're trying to take apart the European Union. They're trying to take apart NATO. These are
for
really
decades.
Yeah,
but I also think
it's been intensified to the point that this very week, guess what? They're going after Paul Ryan. Well, wait a minute. They're just trying to foment dissent and discontinue and disrupt.
We also do a pretty good job on our own of undermining trust in institutions.
Let's stay on these hearings for a second. So, Dana, on one hand, it can be said that Devin Nunes may not have, unveiled some of the information or handled this investigation properly or the way you would like it or we would like it. But Adam Schiff also made some accusations that he had to walk back about having direct evidence versus circumstantial evidence.
I do think that there's just such a stark difference between how the House chairman, both the Senate and the Democrat, have handled this and how the senators yesterday, Warner and Burr, handled it. And I actually think I would end the House investigation. I would abandon it. And I would let the senators do the investigation because it seems like that's the serious one that is not tainted. I don't think anybody's going to believe anything that comes out of the House. So let the Senate handle it, let the FBI handle it, and move on from there.
With the Senate, the way you described it, I think we would all agree with you. Does that eliminate the need for an independent investigator, given what the senators
if you are at the White House and you think that is in your best interest, that you don't want a special prosecutor, then yeah, I think it could.
I think more and more Republicans are coming to the conclusion we do need a special prosecutor. And I might add, Dick Cheney. Dick Cheney said that, this comes back to what we were just discussing, Greg, that he considers what the Russians did an act of war.
No, I'm not saying that what the Russians did was okay. I'm just saying that they're hardwired to take advantage of our vulnerabilities. When our guard goes down, the bear wakes up. So the best outcome for us is to understand that and accept it and move on to the bigger issues, which are terror. That is our existential threat. It's not Russia.
I wanted you to save that because we're going to talk more about this in the next block, so you got to come up with more notes.
Damn it!
Yeah, we'll right you're out of info.
Over the last year, FBI Director Jim Comey has come under fire from both the left and the right. Republicans were upset when he cleared Hillary Clinton of criminal wrongdoing over her emails. Democrats upset with him when he announced another probe just days before the election, all to ultimately clear her once again. Last night at a dinner in Virginia, Comey insisted he and his bureau are not in the business of playing politics.
The last year, it's been almost a year now, has been both difficult and easier than you might think. And I'll tell you, I've never been prouder of the FBI. What makes it easy is we're not on anybody's side, ever. We're not considering whose ox will be gored by this action or that action. Now, we're not fools. I know that when I make a hard decision, a storm's going to follow. But honestly, I don't care. If we ever start to think about who will be affected in what way by our decisions in a political sense, we're done.
Now, this was really difficult, I think, for Jim Comey. His reputation, as I say, has been taking shots from left and right. But there's also the case that Jim Comey, according to stories out today, was told by the Obama White House not to talk about the Russian probe. So he had the go-ahead to say something about a continuing investigation into Hillary Clinton about 10 days before the election, but he was given a red light by guess who? The Obama administration, when he asked to write an op-ed talking about the Russia.
Part.
I'm sorry?
The op-ed part is the operative part.
Well, you talk. Go ahead then.
Well, listen, I think there are two Jim Comeys out there. The Jim Comey who came out and said we have, 1,000 active investigations, all 50 states in the union, surveilling ISIS and watching what they're doing. That's the good Jim Comey. Then there's the bad Jim Comey that wants to write an op-ed. A spy chief wants to write an op-ed. How insane is that? And I don't blame the Obama administration for saying, no, you can't and shouldn't write an op-ed. No, we don't want Jim Comey's opinion, FBI director. We want to know what he knows, who's being surveilled and why. That's more important. So I think he's getting caught up in the politics. He is getting caught up in the politics. He wants to be everyone's friend, and he keeps flip-flopping.
Okay, so Lisa, let's use Eric's parameters and say Jim Comey made the right decision, or the Obama administration made the right decision in terms of the investigation, that we want our investigators to come to a strong conclusion. But Jim Comey, in the mind of many people involved in politics in America, Jim Comey says everything is viewed through, are you left-wing or right-wing, and does it fit your agenda or not? But in terms of politics, he damaged one candidate, Hillary Clinton.
Well, I'm not a big fan of parameters, but no, but look, I also think if you're the FBI director, he was set up to be involved in politics from the beginning, because he had a presidential candidate who was under investigation. Now we know that there, were at least 2 investigations involving both candidates. But so it was unavoidable. How do you avoid being inserted in the political election when there's a candidate, one of major candidates, being investigated? So what was he ultimately going to do? And I think no matter what decision he had come to, was going to be criticized. Can you imagine if he had recommended an indictment and permanently changing the course of the election, even more so than the decision that he ultimately made? And also, don't forget the fact that Loretta Lynch put him in a pretty tough spot as well by compromising herself by meeting with Bill Clinton. So in his defense, to some degree, I don't necessarily know if he's handled everything as artfully as he should have, but I also think that he's been faced with some pretty unprecedented things as an FBI director to try to sift through.
Well, it's odd, though, Dana. The question is, did he adhere to the standards of the FBI in terms of the investigation, but botch it in terms of the politics?
Well, I think he kind of was between a rock and a hard place, but I also understand. I think that the op-ed idea was just the communications vehicle. It wasn't that Jim Comey was like, I want to give my opinion, which we would normally say, but he wanted to have one statement out there that would be something where he wasn't giving an interview where anything could be left to interpretation. So maybe what he should have said is, I think what he wanted to do, he wanted to make it public in some way. And what I understood from the President Obama team, this is going back a couple months now, was that they were concerned that if they actually said that the Russians are trying to help Donald Trump in the election, that it would look like President Obama was trying to help Hillary at Donald Trump's expense. And President Obama didn't want to be that guy. So everybody was caught in a tough decision-making process.
Greg?
What?
Well, first of all, we have news that Eric and President Obama agree on something here.
Which is interesting because you know who is behind this collusion, the Russian collusion? President Obama. He shot down the op-ed. Why did he do that? Because the birth of birtherism was Hillary Clinton, and this was his payback. He's the one behind this whole thing. He didn't want Hillary in the White House, so he killed the revelatory information that was going to appear in the op-ed, destroying Hillary's chances, sending her to the woods where she belongs. By the way, Comey, you know, I said this before, Comey is no man's homie. One of my favorite lines. Because 1 minute you think you like the cut of his jib, and the next minute you go, he's a treasonous cat. He's like Metallica. 1 year it's a good album. 2 years later it's a terrible album. Then it's a good album. Or maybe it's like vegetables. Nobody likes it, but somehow it's good for you. So I think, you know, the fact that everybody, right, left, center, gets mad at this guy means that maybe he's kind of good for you. Right. Like a Metallica album.
Don't tell the Wall Street Journal. Yeah, Wall Street Journal can't stand him. But I will say this, that, you know what? Democrats are split between Obama's decision and the outrage that still exists among Hillary's supporters.
By the way, where's President Obama right now?
Obama did her wrong.
He's left the country. Do we know where President Obama is right now? Could he be with Putin as we speak?
And they did love Comey for about a 2-week period when he said, we're not recommending an indictment.
No, nobody loved him after that press conference. That press conference was kind of, I don't know about that press conference. Next, is it treason to veto a bill that raises the minimum wage? Baltimore's Democratic mayor is being accused of just that, treason, after being persuaded that a hike would hurt low-income workers more than help them. Hear her defend her controversial veto straight ahead.
Last week, the mayor of Baltimore, a Democrat, did something that stunned many in her party. Catherine Pugh vetoed a bill that would have raised the minimum wage in her city to $15 an hour by 2022. The backlash has been brutal. One local leader calls it an act of treason against the poor. As a candidate, Mayor Pugh said she would sign the legislation, but changed her mind after talking to members of the community and business leaders about the consequences. She learned it would actually drive businesses out of the city, taking away jobs for the unskilled. Here's more from Pugh on her decision.
I don't think there's anybody that wants more to see the minimum wage increase than I do. But I think it's important that we follow the lead of the state. For those reasons and the economic impact that I think that this has on the city, making us the hole in the donut, it is not appropriate at this time that I would sign this bill.
Okay, I think that is courageous. What she was saying there is that she wants to follow the state. The state legislature is working on a minimum wage bill that would raise it to $10.10 an hour. She said, Greg, that if it goes to $15 an hour, then jobs will leave the city of Baltimore and go to the counties surrounding, and she thinks that would be bad for the city. What's wrong with that?
By speaking the truth, she left the cult of ideology. That's what happened. The easiest way to describe what the minimum wage boost does is if you have a pizza pie with 8 slices, 8 people can eat. If you divide it into 6 slices, only 6 people can eat. But this common sense goes out the window in liberal cities, because normally we see the minimum wage as the first rung on the ladder up a career. So it's okay if it's $3.35 when I was young or whatever it is now. But if you live in Baltimore, in other cities ruined by leftism, the first rung is often the last rung. So you understand why they're fighting to increase the minimum wage, because that's all they got. What she's trying to say, the only way out of this is to create more rungs through more businesses. And other people are saying, no, we need it now.
What did you think of it, Juan? Because you know that city very well. Sorry, Eric.
No.
Because you know Baltimore very well, and I don't know if did you ever recover that as a reporter?
No, never covered.
But you know the inner cities. You covered Washington.
Well, I've been
Philly.
friends with mayors in Baltimore for a while, and I don't know
that explains it.
Mayor Pugh that well. But let me just say that I thought she was extremely brave and right. So she did the right thing by saying no, because the counties right outside the city are already benefiting from loss of jobs that previously would have been located in the city, because Baltimore has been chaotic. We know about the riots and high crime rate and all the rest. So it would have cost a loss of jobs. So she is not saying, though, and this is to respond to Greg, that she's not saying, oh, it's a bad idea to raise the minimum wage.
No.
She's saying, let the state act so that you have a uniform playing field. And I think that's what people are saying across the board, because I thought you were even going to raise robots, because robots will come in.
That's the real answer.
Right? Automation will come in and is cheaper than paying the minimum wage. But I would just say to you, as a matter of morality, first of all, it's not just kids. It's not your first job. Lots of people I think, within range of the minimum wage are now adults, mostly.
Right. I know, that was
Eric, what about the economics of this? And do you think businesses will come out and defend her?
No, I think she stumbled onto the right idea for the wrong reason. And I'll push back on one. Yes, she did the right thing, because when you raise a minimum wage artificially, businesses will do something different. I don't think they were going to leave the city. I think they were going to automate, like Wendy's did, like restaurants in Seattle did. They said, we're not going to pay the 15. We'll automate. You can have a robot do the same thing that these human beings are doing on the food lines. But take it one step further. So if she goes 15 and they go to outside her city, to the county, throughout the state, what if the state goes to 15? They're going to do the same thing anyway. So the answer is yes, don't artificially raise the minimum wage, but not because they're going to move, not because they're just going to automate you out of business.
But Dana, you had even mentioned the $10.10, which I think was the Congressional Budget Office that found that increasing the federal minimum wage, which we're not talking federally, but increasing the federal minimum wage to $10.10 would cost, I think, upwards to 500,000 jobs. But I really think it ultimately comes down to sense when dealing with the minimum wage. Cash goes into one pocket, it comes out of another. So where do you think that money is going to come from? And do you really think employers are going to want to pay someone without a skill set, if it's an entry-level job, or with minimum education, $15 an hour? So as Eric pointed out, what ultimately happens, or at least in the fast food industry, what a lot of them are looking to do is to automate these jobs, because ultimately that's substantially cheaper than bringing in labor that simply doesn't have the skill set to justify paying them $15 an hour. So what do you think is going to happen in these businesses? And to Greg's point, what do you think is going to happen to that first step of the ladder?
Yep, it's not easy, and I would say to the people of Baltimore, have your young people look up to Catherine Pugh, who's a responsible public servant and doing the best that she can.
You look up to her.
I look up to everybody, but not really to you. All right, ahead. Can a cup of coffee make Americans more civil to one another in these tense political times? Starbucks will pour you one for free.
Where's the camera
but only
going?
if you're nice.
Starbucks is working with a Harvard startup that gives free coffee to people with opposing political views as long as they engage in polite discourse. Essentially, each person gets half a gift card, and then they have to meet up to get the free caffeine. Sounds good to me, but how do you find two sides on campus? Remember, it's only one side of this divide that silences the other. It's not the right who needs a bribe to keep from shouting down historians or beating up professors. And it says something that it's a company pushing this new diversity. I sense the Teachers Lounge would not approve. But I have to say, I applaud Starbucks. This app is apt. The campus is now ground zero for toxic identity politics, which seeks to replace natural human collaboration with regressive vindictiveness. Studies on the brain show how cooperation enhances positive feelings, which then drives collaborative activities like creating companies, cities, civilizations. Human evolution relies on cooperation, which is why identity politics feels so backward. Social justice warriors want to return to the dark ages when you communicated with a club instead of joining one. So perhaps a free cup of joe is one small step against a twisted movement that rolls back progress by pitting us against each other. So try the app, have that coffee, and make one for beer. Civilization may depend on it. Dana, I heard you go. Do you think it's a bad? Is it a bad idea?
I don't want to talk to anybody.
That's true. You are antisocial.
I don't want to talk.
You run from our fans. No, I'm kidding. I'm joking. But why don't? You don't think this is a good idea?
I really don't care.
No.
I honestly, do I think it's a good idea? I think it's unnecessary.
Really?
Yes, I don't think that people need to talk. I know this. I can't believe that you think this is a good idea. I thought your monologue was going to go in a completely different, Greg Gutfeld direction.
Well, I try to be unpredictable, Dana. And also, I love.
Are you going to do this?
I love.
Are you going to make some small talk with someone to get a free cup of coffee?
I don't need to. I do that every day. I disagree with everybody.
So you're not getting free
I take
coffee.
the subway every morning and talk to the real people.
Do you talk to anybody?
What time?
Who do you talk to?
I go every morning, 11.
Who do you talk to on the subway?
I talk to the singers.
You look at your phone.
I talk to the singers. No, I talk to the singers.
I know you give them money, which is very nice of you.
Oh, thank you. Where are we going with this?
You're
Yes,
leading
go
it.
for it.
Yes. It strikes me that Starbucks is trying to reach out to the other side. They've been, they've been social justice warriors for a very long time.
True.
Remember, we're going to take in this many refugees, yada, yada, yada. All of a sudden, they're starting to reach out saying, we're going to hire all these veterans now. It was 10,000.
Oh, that's not fair. They were hiring veterans before.
I know, but they're making a big push to hire more veterans. And I think it's great. I think it's fantastic. But to say, hey, if you're on the political left, why don't you meet up with someone who's on the political right over a Starbucks, and maybe they can work their way into the more conservative group of consumers, which, frankly, they haven't really. They've made substantial inroads into liberalism, not necessarily into.
Well, what do you do if you're an independent or a libertarian? Are you not invited?
No coffee for you.
No coffee. I would be fine with this in like the afternoon. In the morning, I'm with Dana. You don't really want to talk to anyone until you have your coffee, but maybe in the afternoon. But no, I think this is a good idea. I mean, I typically don't like Starbucks because they do engage and interject themselves in so many political debates, and it's really annoying. But I think at a time where people are lighting cities on fire, and people that have opposing political views are punching each other in the face, that may be encouraging some civil discourse, particularly on college campuses, is not a bad thing.
Well, you know what I want?
In the afternoon.
I want a box load of these free coupons because I talk to you guys every day.
Exactly.
Right?
You can just milk
if
the
I
system.
give you, Gregory and Eric, if I give you guys half a coupon, right, then I get to go with both of you and I get free coffee.
There you go.
This is a good idea.
You know, in the back, maybe they have beer.
Well, I think that the thing is, coffee's hot, so people could throw it on
no,
you.
don't
make
do
it,
that.
Make it
You can
alcohol.
put Bailey's in your coffee,
That's true.
and it's a good
You
compromise.
put Bailey's in everything. I put Bailey's in my Baileys.
But there's Bailey's in your little
No,
uniform.
that's water. Stop it, Lisa.
I'm joking.
What do you mean, little uniform?
Should President Trump and the Freedom Caucus take Starbucks up on the offer? Dana says no. The president just threatened war against caucus members in the midterms if they don't get on board with the Republican agenda. The response next.
On Friday, the Conservative Freedom Caucus helped Democrats sink President Trump's effort to repeal and replace Obamacare. The president hasn't forgotten, and today he issued a dramatic public warning to the members. He tweeted, "The Freedom Caucus will hurt the entire Republican agenda if they don't get on the team and fast. We must fight them and Dems in 2018. And here's how two caucus members responded earlier today.
I'm not here to assign blame to anyone. I'm not here to point to the future. What I'm focused on doing is doing what we told the voters we're going to do. Let's forget the blame and what may happen in the future. Let's just do what we said. And that's what the Freedom Caucus and that's what Republicans are committed to.
Most people don't take well to being bullied. It's constructed in fifth grade, but it may allow a child to get his way, but that's not how our government works.
Eric, what's your take?
So I'm very, very close to these Freedom Caucus. I love these guys. I love what they do with health care because, again, the health care bill helped the very upper echelon of incomes, middle and lower income got hurt into the elections that would have hurt both the House in 2018 and President Trump's reelection bid. However, I will say I think they need to play ball on tax reform, and I think here's why. I think there's going to be, you have both factions, but across the board, upper, middle, and lower income families, households, individuals will do better when we get tax reform. The whole conservative premise is lower taxes, keep more of your own money, it'll create growth, and lives get better. So I think they need to work with the Tuesdays group or the moderates in the House to get that stuff pushed through. And I think they will. By the way, Jim Jordan, next Speaker of the House.
Dana, so Eric mentioned tax reform. How does this affect that in trying to get other things done, big things done?
I don't know, but I'm going to pop some popcorn and watch it all. This is some hardball politics coming from the White House, and I don't know how these members who are very dedicated to their principles will take to it. If those two that we just heard from are any sign are symbolic of the rest of the group, we could be in for a rocky ride, or this could just be a way of like airing out all the differences, and then they come together.
Greg, so Dana mentioned hardball politics. Obviously, we try to work with them on health care reform. So is this sort of like a carrot and stick approach?
I know.
And this is
Everybody
the
always
stick
says
we're
they're going to
saying?
pop popcorn, but they never do.
Oh, I do.
They go, oh, I'm going to pop popcorn.
Well, actually,
no,
I
you
just
don't.
buy it.
You're not going to pop
Like,
popcorn.
I eat
buy
chocolate.
No deal is perfect. That's why it's called a deal. What do you expect from the guy who wrote The Art of the Deal? Deal comes before ideology. When you elect a centrist who likes to make deals, the deal is likely going to be reflecting a centrist. And tribalism like this, it doesn't build anything. Differences are vital, but it's also important to settle them. So I say get together, have some coffee. Starbucks supply the coupons.
And popcorn.
And popcorn.
The president did win by almost double digits in a lot of these districts. Do you think that this is going to have any effect in sort of pushing them in his direction?
Well, some of them actually ran ahead of him.
True.
Yeah, but he is threatening to go and campaign against people who would buck him. So, you know, to my mind, this is really interesting because I believe they were some of his biggest supporters on the campaign trail, right?
Yeah, but here's the thing with tax reform. He's going to have the Freedom Caucus on his side. He's going to have problems with the moderates.
No, right. But let me just say that they needed health care reform to take away some of the taxing.
That's a theory.
In order to create a justification for taking away some taxes.
For the moderates.
Well, but I'm just saying, this
another
ain't going to
thing
happen.
that the president could do is threaten to take away their Obamacare exemption on Capitol Hill.
All right. Well, we can continue this
That's a good
conversation
one.
during the break because one more thing is coming up next.
And it's boring.
Demonstrators in Paraguay have set fire to the country's Congress amid violent protests against a bill that would let the president seek re-election. Protesters stormed the legislature, breaking windows and fences. The country's 1992 constitution, introduced after 35 years of dictatorship, strictly limits the president to a single 5-year term. But sitting President Horacio Cartes is attempting to remove the restriction and run for re-election. Protesters were photographed setting fire to barricades in the streets of Asunción, near the Congress building, on Friday night. The AFP news agency said the protesters had managed to break into the building and ransacked the offices of those who backed the bill, setting several fires. Police used rubber bullets and water cannons to disperse the crowd. Earlier, the crowd took to the streets following a private meeting of senators, which approved a bill to amend the Constitution. The bill must also be approved by the other House of Parliament, the Chamber of Deputies, where President Cartes' party holds a majority. The chamber's president, Hugo Velázquez, told ABC Color, in Spanish, that the sitting planned for the following morning would no longer take place and no decision would be made on Saturday. He urged people to stay calm. Opponents say the bill will weaken the country's democratic institutions. Paraguay was controlled by dictator General Alfredo Stroessner, who seized power in a coup, from 1954 until 1989. The new constitution in 1992 created the modern government, but there has been a long period of political instability and party infighting, as well as a failed coup attempt. President Cartes' term is due to end in 2018.